So we're here. We're recording our editor podcast. Chris Albrecht just mentioned that we're 1 week out from Christmas Eve, which is exciting. A little nerve-wracking. I haven't finished my shopping. Before we get into that, let's go around the horn. I mentioned you, Chris. How you doing?
I'm good. Thanks, Mike. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays. I'm going to call you Catherine Lamb today. Catherine Lamb.
Hi, I'm great. I just had Christmas cookies for breakfast, so I'm in a very good place.
And judging by your name on the podcast, for those listeners who don't know, when we sign into our podcast recording, we can make up our own name. Jen Marston's chosen to call herself Humbug today, so you're not in the holiday spirit, Jen. I take it.
Oh, I'll get there.
She's got a week. Yeah.
I have a week, yeah. Maybe Catherine send me some of those Christmas cookies. That'll do the trick.
Mm-hmm.
Christmas cookies? You're making Christmas cookies and you haven't sent them around?
Well, they're non-denominational holiday cookies, but yes.
Do they have CBD in them?
Not this batch, but you're giving me some good ideas.
Should you put a warning on them if you're giving them to families and say, hey, this has CBD? That's the question.
That is the question. I'll report
back. It would be much more fun to not put a warning on them and see what happens.
Very true. I'll let you guys know what went down next year when we check back in.
The tension over those tense political conversations at holiday family dinners maybe could just be more relaxed, even though, it's just CBD, just going to be kind of relax your muscles a little bit, maybe.
Yeah, everyone just chill out.
All right, let's talk food tech. One of the big stories of the past week I wrote about, it was this past Friday. We wrote about the news that Nomiku, a seminal and early consumer sous vide startup, was shutting its doors. And they shut their doors basically last Friday. It was a pretty quick thing. It was no real forewarning. I had a chance to talk with Lisa Fetterman about the news. And what she just told me is they just couldn't make it work. They couldn't make it work. They had pivoted a year ago to also really start delivering food and center the company on basically sous vide ready meals. But at the end of the day, this started to struggle. She had indicated they would need to raise money if they were to kind of sustain themselves in the longer term, and it just wasn't in the cards. So this is interesting. I think it's maybe a little bit of a sign of some of the struggles some of these sous vide startups have had. Chris, you've been covering these companies as well. What did you think of this news?
At the risk of sounding, I don't know, it didn't surprise me, is what I should say, right? Because as you pointed out in your article, Mike, and you broke this story, that they had pivoted sort of from hardware, right? There are a bunch of sous vide wands out there. I got really into sous vide 2 years ago, especially when I first started working at the Spoon. And then since then have been like, it's just too much work. You have to bring a water bath up to temperature, and then you have to, sous vide the meat for however, an hour or whatever. And then you have to finish it off. And I know that, Nomiku pivoted more towards meals, but it just seemed like, I don't know. It didn't seem like it didn't surprise me, is what I should say. They haven't gained. It seems like nobody's really talking about them. It wasn't, I don't know, top of mind on anybody that I've talked with. So, and the combination of a meal delivery service, we've just seen those just haven't really worked that well, especially when you're a small company like Nomiku.
I think what you said, where it just takes too long, it's not all that convenient, really gets to the heart of it, right? I mean, I think we've learned from this that, sous vide circulators are not the next microwave, as much as they've wanted to be that. And I think that there's been attempts to make sous vide easier to do because it is a time consuming process almost by definition. So that's what really I think was at the core of their idea. Let's do these sous vide ready meals. And just, hey, people could just kind of pull out the food and warm it up. You press a button and go. But at the end of the day, it still takes 20 minutes, half an hour. So it's just not the microwave. It takes too long. And I think, you also saw a little bit of a similar attempt by Chef Steps where they try to do their sous vide ready sauces. Because another complication is, hey, if I'm going to have to cook and put all these sauces together and wait another half an hour, it's a lot of work. So Chef Steps tried to go down that path and they didn't work. And as we saw earlier this year, Chef Steps also basically had some struggles, had to basically do a significant amount of layoffs and then got acquired by Breville. What followed, or what came before that, was a year ago or so, Sancerre shut its doors. So it does seem like we're kind of seeing essentially a changing of the guard, or really kind of this consumer sous vide market kind of reaching an end of a chapter. The only really big exit we saw was Anova.
Right. Well, and even think about Anova is coming out with a steam oven, right? So they're kind of expanding beyond the sous vide wand. And another startup we mentioned in terms of like kind of the sous vide, the carnage, for lack of a better term, is First Chop, which was a company that for one of the first companies I wrote about at The Spoon, which was their whole meal kit hook was they created really tasty proteins like steaks, ossobuco, and chicken, and then would shrink wrap them. So all you had to do was sous vide them. And they got out of, and they even, part of the deal was when you got a subscription or ordered a box, they sent you a free sous vide wand. And they, after a while, after not that long, I think less than a year, around a year, they got out of that business entirely because they're then pivoted towards other, I think, more business B2B type stuff. But they were like, even they recognized they couldn't make any money off it.
Yeah, it's like this combination of like businesses where you try to combine hardware and meal delivery. These companies are trying to emulate in a way what we saw a successful recipe or successful kind of formulation in the coffee market with Nespresso and Keurig. But as we've learned, it's not really quite the same. I mean, I think that there are companies like Tavalla that actually are seeming to make a go of it. But by and large, that seems more the exception to the rule. Yeah,
I think the differentiator that you pointed out, Mike, and why they're not the next microwave is just speed. Like Chris, you said it too. I got a sous vide wand last year. Granted, I'm vegetarian, so I don't use it as much. It's mainly for meats, but it's just the time thing. I'm like, okay, it takes 30 minutes at least to bring the water up to temperature alone. And then you have to cook it low and slow. Then you have to sear it. And even when I use the sauces from the Jewel Ready sauces, that's a cool idea. But when I can just nuke something in the microwave or get a frozen meal or, you know, any of these other things you're saying that just give you much more instantaneous results, it's not feasible for a weeknight, really.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It almost seems like the sous vide market is trying to appeal to consumers who want convenience, but then not delivering on that convenience.
What has taken off over the past year or two is another category in air fryers, right? So that is a category which allows you to cook food fairly quickly, and it's a fairly straightforward thing, right? You put something in like a chicken nugget out of the frozen. Out of your freezer, and it cooks it actually in a much tastier way, a much better way than a microwave would. And then also we've seen obviously the rapid rise and kind of runaway success of Instant Pot, but that's cooking basically more complicated meals, right? The thing about sous vide is it's largely cooking, by and large, a slab of meat. Mm-hmm. Most people are used to throwing that on a grill. I think there's room for new categories of for the consumer kitchen, and we've seen that with the rise of air frying and pressure cookers. But I think consumers basically just tried sous vide, and then it's just found it largely too difficult.
Yeah, I mean, I used to work in a restaurant. That was the first time I ever saw a sous vide. They would sous vide all their meat. I think for something like that, it makes a lot of sense because you want it to be perfect every time. There's a lot of consistency, but just it's too much trouble for a home cook.
So that's one category of product that we've seen rise and start to enter struggles. But I still feel like there's a lot of other categories trying to make a breakthrough. Chris, you wrote a piece just yesterday about some hits and misses in kitchen tech Kickstarter. Talk a little bit about some things you saw this past year.
You know, Kickstarter continues to be a place where entrepreneurs can crowdfund, get lots of money to fund their food tech dreams, product ideas. It seems like if you really want to make money, though, do something in coffee or booze or some kind of drink, because of the ones we covered last year, the majority were some related to drink. So there was the Ode coffee grinder, which just launched last week, and they've already raised more than $600,000 and still have more than 50 days to go in their Kickstarter campaign. The Mosi tea decanter or brewer, I should say, the UKEG Nitro cold brew coffee maker, the travel decanter, the Stasis glycol homebrew chiller. Like all of these things are around, well, not only drinks, but also passions, right? So beer making, the coffee audience, as anybody who's written for The Spoon, Jen and Catherine, I know, like, if we write about coffee, we get it gets a ton of traffic. There's just such a rabid community around that it's not a surprise that you're able to say, hey, if I can help you make your coffee better or more precise, there are lots of people who are willing to spend a fair amount of money. I think the Ode grinder was like a $249 for pre-order, and all it does was grind your coffee, and you could only do it one batch at a time. It didn't even have a hopper on the top. So, along with this, though, we've also covered throughout the year how some of these have gone bust, right? Like Right Press made its money last year. They raised more than $1 million for their No Mess French press, but then they still haven't really delivered to backers yet. And the website has gone dark at different points, and people are super like backers are just like, hey, I spent,
right.
and they're left holding the bag, which is caveat emptor.
And they take out the anger on you, Chris, because you're one of the few people that wrote about it.
I know they keep writing me.
They have to direct their anger somewhere, much like the people who are curious about spin seem to like come to me to ask me about it because we cover this stuff so closely. Another emerging category that I haven't seen on here, but it just seems like in the last 2 months I've seen new ways to basically take food to work or to school, like these kind of more smart food containers. Have you noticed kind of an uptick in that category?
Yeah, there are two that I've written about. The heat box and the knee oven are both the very stylish modern day lunch boxes, if you will, that you can put your food in and then it'll heat. You can use an app to set it to heat at a particular time. The knee oven also comes with modules like a blender and a chiller, so you can keep things cold, refrigerated, or make a smoothie. Both of these got funded and are supposed to ship next year. The one that was really surprising, and Catherine, I'd appreciate your take on this, was the ARC reusable food containers. You wrote about them. We all thought that was a really good idea, but they didn't even get funding. They didn't even hit their goal.
I know, that was surprising to me. I mean, so for anyone who doesn't know, which probably most people because they didn't get funded. So ARC Reusables is a reusable container that you're meant to take to like sort of fast casual place like Chipotle or even like a Whole Foods fast or hot lunch area, and then you fill it up and you take it away, and they're silicone so you can easily wash them in the dishwasher. They have specific measurements inside of them so that they're really easy for food service workers to fill with, like, say, half a cup of something. I wonder if a lot of the issue was around people just not really thinking of them as just Tupperware substitutes, which aren't quite as appealing. But really their whole thing was like, no, this isn't just to keep your leftovers in, it's to take to these places, these hot bars, whatever, and to fill up so that you're reducing the amount of single-use plastics and takeaway containers. And I also wonder if some of the issue was food service not really wanting these sort of things out there, because even though in California, they're putting some regulations in place to encourage consumers to bring their own containers. A lot of places you go in, I've tried to do this before and been like, oh, could you possibly, even with coffee being like, oh, I brought my own mug. Some places will say, we can't accept that for health code reasons. And so I think some people might have been skeptical about whether these would actually be accepted at a lot of the places they go and eat.
Yeah, I think part of the problem is I think consumers are still trying to learn about what silicone is. I mean, I think there's been a huge, it was a slow build for Stasher. So Stasher is basically a replacement for a Ziploc bag, but it's reusable. What I like about it is actually you can cook, you can actually put it in a microwave and heat it. Whereas the thought of microwaving something in a Ziploc bag, I just envision melted plastic in my food. So,
speaking of, last conversation.
Yeah, you could sous vide it. So I think these types of these categories of containers are definitely going to find more traction. I feel like they just had a fatal flaw in their Kickstarter in that they had a $40,000 goal and they raised $24,000, which is a lot of money on almost 300 backers, but they set their target too high. So it's almost like basically a design error around their campaign. But I'm surprised this didn't make it, but I think this category in general is going to get more traction.
Yeah, and interestingly, they also have operations. They're based in the Netherlands, I believe, as well. And there it's very successful. So I think it's definitely partially the goal being really high and partially just attitudes of consumers. Like in Europe, maybe they're more open-minded towards this, less of a single-use mentality, whereas in the U.S. we might not be as willing to sort of pay to go out of our way to use something beyond just sort of the convenience of a single-use container.
And in contrast, we saw a runaway success for the GoSun folks with their reusable cutlery. And they were the folks that made the solar powered ovens. and they went into cutlery that you could basically put in your wallet and take out at a restaurant, and they raised $300,000 on that. Jen, you wrote about them, right?
I did. I think I put them in my gift guide, but Catherine wrote about them as well.
We both are fans.
We can share.
And you both like the idea. I like the idea.
Well, I think as opposed to a reusable full container, the appealing thing about GoSun is that it's small. Yeah. It's supposed to fit inside your wallet or it's not going to take up a bunch of space. I think the one, like the difference, and one of the reasons I wasn't necessarily 100% surprised by ARC's campaign not being that successful, because GoSun's convenient. You put it in your wallet, you put it in your purse, you don't have to think about it. Whereas something bigger, you have to kind of haul around all day if you're going to use it. And I think a lot of, it's like quick service restaurants. They're spur of the moment purchases usually. So you may not necessarily have it on you. Whereas theoretically, at least, you could just be carrying a thing of GoSun cutlery around with you everywhere you go and never think twice about it.
Well, I think it's the magic combination of like convenience and low consumer friction, as well as like brings value to the consumers you have to hit. And some of these hit that, some of them don't. Some people just want like cool cooking or coffee gadgets, and those always seem to do well. But it always is like a mystery to predict what will succeed or what won't. Another prediction that about whether something will succeed or not is I predict that Blue Bottle is going to struggle a little bit with they're going to completely zero waste in 2020. You wrote about this, Jen, this past week. Blue Bottle Coffee, which has always been fairly progressive in terms of like their, some of the things they're trying to attempt and trying to nudge their consumers towards better behavior. This is a really big one. They're trying to basically move towards zero waste. That's a big ask for their consumers and what they're going to have to put up with. I think Chris wrote deconvenience it or makes things less convenient for the consumer. Do you think they'll be able to do it?
I'm with you. I think, and the founder, Brian Meehan, in the announcement about it, he straight up said this could be a huge failure and an operational struggle and difficult for consumers. So I think they're aware. But yeah, I mean, I think all of a sudden, even a progressive chain like Blue Bottle, which has always kind of appealed to a more progressive audience, I think, in terms of these sustainability measures, to overhaul your entire operation so that it's zero waste. So that's, not just reusable coffee cups that you have to now put a little deposit on and then remember to take it back to get it cleaned. It's if you want to, order a croissant, like it's not going to come in one of those little paper bags. It's going to be in a reusable container. It just seems like a very expensive operation that, it makes me wonder why they're choosing to overhaul the entire thing at once, as opposed to slowly introducing pieces of zero waste in over, say, the course of a couple years. And yeah, I mean, I have to be honest, I'm a little bit skeptical about whether or not they're going to successfully become zero waste across their U.S. stores in 2020.
But there's no doubt what they're doing is gutsy, and it's kind of a big moonshot type of approach. Chris, you wrote about it in the newsletter. You compared them with the Tesla truck in terms of like they're basically pulling a Elon Musk here and saying, forget what everyone thinks. We're just going to do this.
Yeah, the Cyber truck, to be more specific, just to make sure that we have the right nomenclature. Yeah, no, I like, I'm a big fan. I had a college professor who once said that he's a big fan of vertical cuts instead of horizontal cuts. The idea being that you just lop off something entirely and get the pain over with. And I agree with what everybody's saying here, right? Like this could be disastrous for the company. But if you're going to try it anywhere, try it with Blue Bottle in a town that's, they're based out of San Francisco, and it's a very progressive town, bunch of techie people who ostensibly at least want to save the world. What I like is just, it's not a half. I like that it's not a half measure. I like that they're just going all in, just like, yep, something's got to be done. So let's do it. Like it always bothers me when I go into a place, like if I go to get, I don't know, like a croissant or whatever, I don't need the bag. I don't need, I can that's just more waste. So I applaud it. I think it's great. And I think it is very Muskian. Love or hate Elon Musk, he is doing his best to just drag us into the future with electric vehicles and solar power, hyperloops, all those things. So, I'm all bravo, I say. That's me clapping.
Muskian. If he were to come out with a cologne, I think he should call it Muskian.
Or just Musk.
Or just Musk is probably better.
Well, it's also interesting to me that Blue Bottle, Nestle, right, owns the majority stake in them. So, this could function a couple ways. Like, one, they sort of have that assurance that they have like a big company like Nestle backing them. It's maybe a little bit less of a risk to do something like this. But it's also cool that Nestle is like all right with this and supporting it.
Yeah, it seems like something that could have just been killed in like in the bowels of some Nestle meeting somewhere. Said no,
right.
no one's.
I imagine Blue Bottle's probably like a rounding error for Nestle.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
But this could be a cool way for them to be like, look, we're progressive, we're Nestle, but we love zero waste. Like, look, we're supporting Blue Bottle, and then Blue Bottle gets to do it.
Yeah, I mean, and Nestle's European, right? I honestly think there's a difference oftentimes between the sensibilities and kind of like how much a company embraces sustainability in a European company versus a North American company.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So this may make some people uncomfortable, much like the Cybertruck makes people a little bit uncomfortable about the future. But I'm telling you something that makes me, or maybe some people, really uncomfortable is this idea of like making milk without humans. Catherine, you wrote about Turtle Tree Labs last week. This company that is looking to create milk from lactating mammary gland cells. Tell us about this dystopian kind of futuristic product we may have someday.
Yeah, for sure. So they're based in Singapore, and they, as you said, they basically like lab-grown meat, but they just take the mammary gland cells of any animal and then put it in a solution, and the cells lactate. So then they can separate the milk out from the cells. So, they can do that from cows, they can do that from sheep, they can do that from goats, and they can do it from humans. So, interestingly enough, I spoke to their CEO and CTO last week or 2 weeks ago, and they said that their first product will likely be what they're calling human milk, aka breast milk, because it's quite a high, like they can enter the market at a much higher price point than, there's tons of alternatives to milk out there, oat milk, whatever, almond milk that are relatively inexpensive, but the only alternative to like breast milk is extremely expensive per lacta. And so they're hoping that they can start selling relatively quickly by entering the market with human milk.
I have no doubt that like there will be a market for this. There always is, particularly at a high price point. And we all know that, moms want the best for their kids. And if this promises just maybe a better milk than like formula, and they can't afford Prolacta or they want an alternative to that, I'm sure they'll find a market. It just, and it just feeds into the idea of it is just kind of weird. So I'm just wondering if from a broad market basis, if people be able to get used to this idea.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, people are already not totally on board with the idea of cultured meat or eggs or whatever to begin with. I think it's like 4 in 10 consumers. The number kind of goes around, but like that's how many people are like, yeah, we've tried this. Like maybe we'll give it a go. But it's a very narrow line to cross to go from like, this is an interesting thing and it's really environmentally friendly. Like there's an argument environmentally to reducing our reliance on animals by making meat in other ways. Human stuff is also just a lot more personal and a little bit more grossing out, like it grosses people out a lot more quickly, I think, just because we're like, whoa, that's crossing a line that like we're not okay with. And then if they're making human milk, like where else will we be going with this technology? Like it's not just limited to like making a more ethical steak on your plate. It can go a lot of different directions, and some of them we might not be okay with.
So I'm wondering, Catherine, I don't know if you know this, but who would they be disrupting in sort of the human milk space, right? Because part of the issue with lab-grown meat is that you have a lot of interested traditional, like incumbent parties who don't want it to succeed, right? You got your cattle ranchers and your meat processors, so they actively want to sort of muddy the waters around, what is processed and what is lab-grown meat. I'm a middle-aged dude So I don't, I am very wary of stepping into sort of any debate around breast milk. I know that it can be a struggle for a lot of women, just being a dad and knowing moms who struggle with it. But I'm just kind of curious, is there, that sort of speaks to me to the market for it, like human milk, is because I don't know if there is a big, in all caps, big human milk industry that could be threatened by it.
There's really only one other option right now, which is Prolacta, which is basically, as far as I know, and I've done some limited research here, it's women who donate their breast milk that's then pasteurized and given to babies, specifically, I think, in hospitals, which is where I maybe see this product, at least at first, like given to sort of preemie babies that maybe would benefit from whatever is in breast milk that's not in formula. Or then eventually I could see as things get more normalized, it could be moms who like maybe can't breastfeed or don't want to, X, Y, and Z. But for right now, there's really only one competitor, the Prolacta, and it is very expensive. It's like hundreds of dollars per bottle, which is the price that Turtle Tree Labs would be.
Well, that's that for this week. Who else has any sort of shopping to do? Catherine, you done with your shopping for your parents?
I have one
family?
gift remaining for my mom. Sorry, Mom, if you're listening. But I have some ideas.
We won't tell her.
Yeah.
Hopefully she doesn't listen to the podcast. Chris, does your mom listen to the podcast?
I don't know if she does. I know she reads the articles, but I don't know if she listens to the podcast.
Okay, so you could tell us, did you get any good food tech for her for Christmas?
I did. So, Mom, if you happen to be listening, turn it off now. I actually backed, speaking of hardware, I actually backed the Brew tea maker, which now that I think about it, I forgot to mention in my roundup, ironically. It is a countertop tea maker, and what I like about it is that it only brews like 1 cup of tea at a time, so you can put in loose leaf tea. They drink a lot of tea, and rather than kind of boiling an entire kettle of water, they can just put in the loose leaf, brew that 1 cup of tea at the temperature they want, and they're done with it.
Nice.
Hopefully, I mean, it won't arrive by Christmas, but hopefully, A, it will get made, and B, they'll, it will come out and I can get it to them at some point in the next year.
Jen, what did you get for your family? Any sort of food tech gifts?
Well, like Chris just did, I'll tell my mom to quit listening if she's listening. I did get her an ember because she is definitely a person who is always running to the microwave to heat up.
You really love your mom.
It's nice. Yeah. Show love through food tech. I have to be honest. I'm one of those people who forgets to shop and then panics at the last minute. So, give it a few days and I'll be thinking about that stuff.
I feel like that show love through food tech should be like our new catchphrase.
I like it.
That's next year's holiday gift guide tagline.
Mm-hmm.
That is. All right, guys. Well, this has been a lot of fun. We will probably take next week off in terms of podcasts. So everyone who is listening, have a great holiday season and enjoy and spread love through food tech.
Yes.
Thanks, everyone.
Hey.
Bye, guys.
Bye, everyone.